Good morning, everyone. Thanks for taking the time this morning. Today's webinar, diagnosing issues within your SQL Server estate in the era of connected health. First, let's just start with a couple of housekeeping items. All attendees are on mute during this webinar, but we want to hear your questions. So if you have any during the course of this presentation, please enter it into the question box, and we'll make sure that we leave plenty of time at the end of the webinar to go through those. This webinar is also being recorded, and we'll follow up with a copy of that recording, as well as the slides over the next couple of days. So let's get started with some introductions and an overview of what you can expect from today's webinar. My name is Chris Ranvier. I'm a pre-sales engineer here at Redgate Software. My contact information below. Please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. Also, my Twitter handle is at DevOpsChris. That's ops with a letter Z. I've been with Redgate for just over 2 years, and as part of my role, I've helped hundreds of organizations implement DevOps best practices to streamline their delivery processes across their applications and databases. In the healthcare sector in particular is where I started my career. I started in Manhattan, working for large healthcare institutions such as Memorial Sloan Kettering. Also, I worked for Pfizer Pharmaceuticals. So I'm familiar with some of the challenges that you all face out there and really how they differ from other environments. As I mentioned briefly before, healthcare organizations are under increasing pressure really to release software faster and faster in order to continue delivering value to your end users and to your customers. But really, how are you all keeping up with that speed? Do you all have visibility to those releases and how they affect your SQL servers to really stay ahead of those issues and really need be, being able to diagnose those issues in 5 minutes or less? For healthcare and life sciences and pharma organizations, SQL Server Monitoring is a global consideration that must provide the DBAs visibility to your SQL Server estate, not only from a capturing an alert perspective, but to also be able to performance tune those servers to be as robust as possible. By incorporating the database into these processes, you can ensure security and patient privacy are maintained. Today's webinar will focus on some of the key challenges healthcare professionals like you all are experiencing and really how monitoring is helping to overcome those. For those of you who do not know Redgate, we've been around for just over 18 years. Our key focus is helping companies improve the quality and efficiency of their database development, primarily SQL Server. But we also have a range of tools, including Oracle and .NET. I'll draw your attention quickly just to a couple of points which might be of interest, and then we'll move on to the content for today's webinar. First, we have a huge presence in the community, sharing best practices, learnings, and helping to solve problems with the database community through our hubs, which you may be familiar with, SQL Server Central, as well as Simple Talk. We have a huge focus on continuous delivery and improvements to our products. And as a result, we've released over 1,000 major and minor product releases last year alone, a number which we see to be increasing year over year. We're also working with over 91% of the Fortune 100, as well as small startups, global organizations, and really everything in between. Okay, so let's get started into SQL Monitor. Why is it really necessary to monitor your SQL servers? In my opinion, I can break it down into really three main topics. First and foremost, visibility. You need to always have a complete view of your estate, whether you all are responsible for, just a handful of servers or, multiple hundreds. The key to providing really seamless service to your users, to your customers, is visibility to that estate. Secondly, you want to always be able to track and acknowledge changes. Understanding, what your server behaviors are. Understanding what those alerts are doing. What instances are being exposed to those alerts, why are they occurring? Understanding just those trends and being able to acknowledge them just to start to be more proactive. And then lastly, incorporating DevOps. As I was saying beforehand, we at Redgate are developing a lot of tools for the front end of that house to become more and more robust, more and more agile, getting to release faster and faster and faster. The folks on the other end in the operations area, the DBAs, you guys and gals need to have those tools that effectively are able to keep up with the pace that's coming down that workflow from development. Redgate SQL Monitor is a web-based monitoring tool that helps teams really looking after SQL Server environments to be more proactive. Not only does SQL Monitor alert you to the current issues, but it also gives you the information that you need to stop them from happening time after time. Now, and I'll show you this when we kind of segue into the demo, we start to integrate with Redgate's deployment tools, as I was talking about, to really allow for context to be given and to tie it in more closely with the overall DevOps practices. A core goal of DevOps is to break down organizational silos by bringing development closer to production. One way to foster this is ensuring that everyone shares the same understanding by having access to a shared monitoring platform. But DBAs typically have a deeper technical understanding of SQL Server than the developers working with it. This is really one area where SQL Monitor's ease of use shines. Being web-based, there's really nothing for a developer to install. It provides intuitive visualizations, in-tool guidance, making it far easier to understand what's going on than in competing tools. We also use granular permissions, which makes it easy to grant teams or individual developers access to view data for only specific servers. To not only have the visibility to the most important piece of any healthcare organization's infrastructure, in my opinion, your SQL Server estate, but to proactively monitor those servers, not just react to issues. Additionally, to performance tune those servers. These situations really rely on our ability to have a real-time information on the state and activities of our database environments, and more specifically, database monitoring. All right. Who has not been in this situation before? I mean, in the early days of my career, I think the bar was just really simply set at providing 99.999% uptime. You could never go down. Mind you, this was before, failover clustering and virtual replication, and so on and so forth. The fiscal impact of an unscheduled downtime was really calculated down to the minute. When an outage happened in my days, the initial visibility to that issue was really our end users flooding the help desk with, phone calls. Really, we had no idea on root cause because back then, possibilities were really endless. We can start looking at it from the perspective of, hardware failure. Was it the operating system? Was it the SQL Server? Was it networking? So on and so forth. Being able to successfully track those changes in your environment was time consuming. The process was really to work the problem and take each possibility out of the equation until you got to an eventual root cause, hopefully. And try to do that as quickly as possible to minimize the organization's financial impact. What that culture really promoted from my standpoint was just resolve the problem, meaning, no real ability to track and acknowledge those changes. We were all just happy that the users were back up and running. Really no traditional post-mortem, no understanding of root cause. We might not even have gotten the root cause back then. Again, we're just happy that everybody was back up and running and we just carried on. No visibility to prevent that from occurring again in the future. The second key challenge I want to discuss really is the increasing volume of data. Okay, for healthcare orgs, you guys are faced with the challenges of securing larger and larger volumes of sensitive information now. As information changes from one state to the other and moves locations, it becomes more difficult to maintain that visibility and to also proactively monitor. Organizations that don't use the right tools will really be unable to guarantee that they can protect their customers or patients' information from end to end, which can cause serious conflicts when it comes to data regulatory compliances such as HIPAA or the GDPR. According to our paper, the state of SQL Server monitoring, the most frequently cited cause of problems in the healthcare industry were bad deployments, followed closely by capacity problems. It's vital for healthcare orgs to reduce downtime. Per Gartner, the cost of an unplanned outage in the healthcare industry is more than 2.5 times higher compared to other industries. Adopting sound SQL Server monitoring practices has been proven to significantly reduce downtime, with high IT performers having 96 times faster mean time to recovery rate than lower performers. Just food for thought there. Okay, let's kind of dive in and allow me to kind of show you this product. Let me open up the demo environment. Okay, SQL Monitor. The first thing that I want to bring to your attention, you come into this product and what you're seeing right now is just a very clean overview, visibility again to your entire estate. And you can see that your instances are really being housed here by these cards. And these cards are dynamic. And what that means is that they are constantly being pulled. As you can see in my screen, you'll see a little loading section up here where it's constantly just moving cards around, ensuring that everything is in a healthy state. If anything moves from a green state, for example, into a warning state or a critical state, you'll notice that those cards will ultimately get populated to the top of your view here so you can immediately start beginning your triage and so forth here. You'll also notice within these cards, you have some categories, all right? So you can see at any given time on an instance, your wait stats, your CPU utilization, and then lastly, your disk IO. These three categories were something that we got collectively back from our customer base in terms of the DBAs. If you needed to really have at a glimpse an understanding of the state of your servers without really diving in deep to do some kind of investigation, these three categories were the ones that those DBAs came back to Redgate with as a must-have, just again to kind of get a good feel in terms of a current state. You'll just see that card just moved there because one of my instances now, as you can see, suffering from a deadlock. You'll also notice that with this particular tool, you can really segregate your views. You can see up top here, if I want to see everything in my environment that is critical, I can go ahead and just click that with a tick on and a tick off to adjust that view. I can also segregate that view here based on environment, okay? So if I'm just concerned with everything in production, I'm a production DBA, for example, and I want to remove the lower environment from my view, again, just a simple selection here will provide that view for you. You'll also notice a compressed card view here as well. So when we talk about SQL Monitor, folks, one instance of a base monitor or a SQL Monitor installation, I can very effectively monitor about 200 to 225 instances. Of course, now you start seeing a convoluted of different cards here. Just simply compress that view down here to a traditional thumbnail view. And if you hover over any of those, you'll get back to that traditional card view. But that just gives you a little bit more visibility as that estate starts to grow. Over on the right-hand side here, a very nice alert history, if you will. I can look at what is going on in my environment from a lot of different perspectives, a very granular every 15-minute view, all the way out to a period of days. And as well, I can also look at those alerts based on my environment. What kind of alerts are being tracked? How often are they being picked up? Have they been cleared, acknowledged, so forth? Really nice, and this really goes towards this visibility mantra that I'm trying to promote here. Kind of giving a little bit more context here. I used to work in a global data center, managed about 3 of those global data centers, and I worked on a shift, if you will. I would do like a 3-day on, 4-day off, 4-day on, 3-day off kind of rotation. And when I would come back into the data center, especially after that 4-day off schedule, I can tell you for the first 2 to 3 hours of my work week was the handover, right? The person that I was taking over from, who would just give me a very granular report in terms of all the issues that were currently in flux, what the current states were, and where I had to kind of pick up the ball and bring it across the finish line. It was very tedious, a lot of busy work, obviously. Something like this really takes that all away. All right. All I want to know from a SQL Server administrative standpoint is what's going on, what's currently happening, and how do I go about acknowledging and addressing it very quickly. I don't want to be dealing with busy work and turnovers and anything of that nature. I just want to understand what my estate is doing at any given moment, and if there's something that is requiring my immediate attention, I'm diving in. Otherwise, we're good to go. Okay. You'll also notice here within my production environment, in the lower, I should say the upper right-hand corners here, you see those little AG designations here. So availability group monitoring out of the box with SQL Monitor. Obviously, I think all of our customers now have some segment of their infrastructure out there in the cloud or being replicated out there. So here you can see out of the box support for all of those AGs, making sure that everything is being synchronized here. There's been no failovers, any kind of log growth that might be occurring, transaction delays. Really good information to have from a disaster recovery standpoint out of the box. I think it's a must-have today in terms of a monitoring tool. I come back into the overview tab, and I want to kind of now dive into an instance, kind of show you what we're presenting to you all in terms of our interface here and really how effective it is. And I'll kind of replicate an issue, probably just a normal everyday occurrence that happens in the day of a life, and really how to kind of go through getting down to root cause, if it's an issue, if it's not an issue, and so forth, with a couple of mouse clicks here, okay? I'm going to take the first instance you see up here on the left, the one that's currently suffering with the deadlock. If I select this key, this is really where the nuts and bolts of this product come into play now for the DBAs. You'll notice here when I bring into this screen, we're looking at the following algorithms. I'm looking at your CPU, your memory, your disk I/O, and also your wait stats, and they're being represented here by this color-coded heartbeat algorithm, if you will. You'll notice along the top of the line here, baseline. You know, having the ability to baseline these resources is key, okay? I think 50% of a monitoring job is really always discounting SQL Server or trying to prove that SQL Server wasn't root cause. Okay, and being able to baseline, understanding what the commonalities of these behaviors are, these attributes, is key when you're trying to get your footing when you're starting to do an investigation, right? Customers, end users, what have you, constantly calling into you, letting you know that they're undergoing some kind of performance impacts, some kind of issues. You know, this is something that we deal with every day. You know, and I can see, of course, you know, throughout this particular graph, you know, I don't have a straight line here. I have obvious, you know, spiking that's occurring within my CPU, within my disk I/O, within my wait stats. This is something that is common. However, is it something that is prefacing an issue, or is it just because of, you know, something that's running on the host or the SQL Server? To be able to baseline and understand that behavior with a simple click of a mouse point, you know, here I can see what the commonality of that behavior is, for example, concerning my CPU. If you follow that shade here, you can see that it starts to really tick up, especially from the 2200 hour, and then it starts to trend down here as we get into the 2 o'clock hour. You know, so if I'm dealing with something of an issue and it's obviously concerning my CPU, and people might be concerned with that, I can already see that there is some kind of issues going on in terms of my behaviors, but it also seems to be common. So I might not be ringing the fire bell immediately, but I do definitely want to start looking at the reasons as to why those spikings occur. You'll also notice this little date stamp area here. This is a must-have, all right, in terms of a monitoring tool, to be able to go back in time. Again, we would like to be as proactive as possible from a monitoring posture standpoint here, but obviously that's, you know, in the best cases. oftentimes what will occur is that you have to do investigations after the fact. To be able to go back in time to a day of the week, a time of the day, and to be able to be presented with all of the information that you guys need to do or have in terms of going through this investigation is imperative. Understanding what queries were running at that time, what weights were affected, what were my CPU and my disk IO behaviors going on at that time frame. Having all of this information is key to being a successful DBA and an operator. All right, I'm going to kind of go through a couple of areas here with you all. Hopefully, I'm making an impact here. Before I go, just another couple of visual indicators here on this timeline. You'll notice, these little yellow globes. These are nice visual indicators in terms of where we're capturing those alerts, what time they were, what type of an alert, and so forth. You'll also notice this little red box here. This is something that I was talking about previously here on how we are tying this product to the back, to the front of the house, I should say, in development. So here, if you are using any of the Redgate products like SQL Change Automation, or maybe you're using SQL Compare to generate those up scripts to use as a source of deployment as you push through the higher environments into prod, we'll pick up those releases now through SQL Monitor. So you can really understand, pre-release, post-release behavior very quickly, okay? So obviously, if I have a release that gets tracked, and then all of a sudden I have, obvious disk IO, CPU, memory, everything starts going to 99, 100% capacity. It's safe to say I don't really have to do a lot of investigation. I might want to concern myself with what the contents of that release was. As I scroll down, just some other good information, and I'll come back up to kind of mimic a use case, but I just want to show this area as well here. We also provide you the top 10 queries and the top 10 weights, and this is all indicative of current time, and I'll kind of come back up here to show you what I mean. For example, and let's kind of mimic a real world here. And I'm going to concentrate just on the CPU. So much like the overview tab, if I want to remove all of the noise or all of the other heartbeats that are not concerning to me, and I just want to see everything that's going on with my CPU, just a tick on, tick off. And you'll notice on this graph bar, I have a gray area here, and then I have this white box on the right-hand side. I can click and hold my mouse, and I can drag this box anywhere. And I often liken this box to a magnifying glass. If I release this box, you'll notice underneath me, all of the data then starts to reconstruct. And of course, I can take this box and I can get really, really granular in terms of my view. So what I want to do, for example, is really concentrate on this dominant spike that's obviously being shown to me here. As I release the mouse underneath me here now, all of the data, in particular, the queries and the weights are going to be indicative of just this one sliver of time that I'm concerned with. Now, because I'm looking at just the CPU, I can also filter that based on these topics here. So I can go ahead and filter by CPU, and now I can see what queries were the ones that were more impactful to my CPU resource in terms of time that it took to complete. I can also take a look at that query and take a look at a query plan. And one of the things that I really, really like about SQL Monitor, this is not something that I had back in my data center days, but this really goes to show you just how intuitive, this software is. Looking at a query report, I can see all of the different expensive operations, all of the heavy duty operations, but I also provide you some warnings here. And this really goes towards performance tuning now. Really understanding how this query can be maybe modified to be more robust. This is something that if you're not a seasoned DBA, maybe a DBA my mistake, which is a title, quite honestly, I'm starting to hear more and more about this year. You don't have to have, traditional DBA experiences. With a tool like this to kind of give you some insight to help you be a better operator, I really think is a must-have as well with any kind of permanent solution that you guys might be entertaining out there. Let's go back up to this area here, for example, just to kind of show you the power of this tool and really how to kind of understand where to go and how to kind of get to root cause very quickly here. So this is a CPU spike. I'm kind of replicating and mimicking here. Let's just assume that I've been captured an alert here that's notified me, or perhaps a customer, an end user has called in and said, they've gotten some performance issues here. So I'm kind of doing a preliminary review. I see the spike obviously here being captured, and I hover over it, and now I'm looking at the data. I've looked at the queries, for example, as we've just seen. But you'll notice here under this graph here, um, the very first thing that I want to kind of bring to your attention, you see both a machine level and a SQL Server level kind of shading. My SQL Server here, lower and darker blue versus my machine level, a lighter shade blue. So from the perspective of investigation, I can already safely say that I see the spike, but it's obviously on my machine level. SQL Server obviously affected by it, but I'm not really going to start diving in, running scripts against my SQL servers. I might want to start looking at what's going on the host first off. What I can also do now is select this. And what this will lead me into now is that comparative baselining. Again, understanding the behavior of this estate model. And this gives me now a very dominant view of that particular spike. And what you can do now here is start looking at what was this instance doing at the same exact time in previous points. So I can go ahead and do a comparative baseline. Let me look at what the CPU was doing on this instance 24 hours prior. And if you guys can see here, you see a little light shaded heartbeat in the rear. And again, kind of mimicking. I can see exactly pretty much at the same time the spiking occurs. However, the duration of how long that CPU stayed at capacity is really the only difference. Not something that I would probably want to say, I found root cause and carry on. Let me get a little bit more information so I can extend that baseline and start looking at this now over a period of days. And as those algorithms start to populate, it's getting a little hard, switch that to a regional view. And now I can kind of trend and see, exactly what is common in terms of that behavior. And again, I think now I've been pretty solidified in my opinion that it seems very common that this CPU spikes at that particular time. Really, the only difference is the length of how long that resource is being taxed. So I have some really good information. At least my footing, I think, is underneath me in terms of my triage here. Okay, I've captured that alert, whether it's from the tool or because I've just been actively monitoring it. I quickly saw that it was on the host level versus my SQL Server. I quickly come in here and start doing some comparative baselining just to get a good feel in terms of nuance to this server. And I can see that, in fact, I do have a commonality of that CPU resource being taxed. Really, the only difference is obviously how long has that resource been taxed. Now you'll see that we're presenting this data in a very graphical format, but of course, if you want to export this information into hard data, just simply clicking this export into a CSV file is all you need to do. So knowing everything that I know at this point in time, now I just want to kind of go and see what processes we're running at this particular time at the host and understand, what might be a potential root cause here. So I'm going to go back into the Overviews tab. I'm going to dive right back into that instance, bring my magnifying glass, if you will, over that exact time frame again. And now I can, as I scroll down, and I'll show you this all momentarily, start understanding everything that's been running on this instance from a process standpoint. Let me remove all of the different algorithms again. I'll hover back over this very dominant spike, tighten it up, make sure that it's right there in the middle so I can be assured that everything that I'm going to be looking at is going to be particular to me. As everything starts to populate underneath, now I can begin seeing. So as I scroll down, just a lot of good information here. So again, all of the queries that we're running here, all of the weights that were impacted because of those queries. And if we're showing you the top 10, if the top 10 is not what you're looking for and you want a little bit more, top 25, top 50 here, just with a simple mouse click. As I scroll down, just a lot of other metrics, good information for you all to understand what's been going on. Again, all of this indicative of just this sliver in time. And of course, I can move my mouse over here to the left, just get a snap menu here that pops up. go down to processes, and this is really where I can see now everything that's been happening. You can see SQL Server, you can see SQB Core Service, a good visual representation of those alerts here. SQB Core Service, obviously a backup job. So I can pretty much comfortably say here, if I was dealing with some kind of issue or a validation of that alert, it's probably a backup job, right? It kicked off, and I can prove that basically either through the logs of my backup server or through SQL Monitor, just through those steps that we've just taken. We've acknowledged the alert, we see the alert, we noticed it was on host level versus machine level. We did some comparative baselining to kind of see what the common behaviors were over periods of time previously, validated our circumstance that we do see, that spiking occurring every day, just really how long is that spiking? And now we kind of see what processes we're running, and we kind of validated here, I think root cause. All of this really with a couple of mouse clicks. I mean, again, kind of going back to my previous days, the amount of time I would have spent just to get to the point where we're at here would probably be a half a day running scripts against specific servers, analyzing the data, looking for trends, trying to really decipher, what root cause is. I mean, you can see, just how much you could be spinning your wheels here. So this kind of goes to really the power of this tool, very how quickly it can really get to helping you get to this point with least amount of time and effort is key today. Let's dive into alerts because I think, with this tool and with this kind of product, this is really the nut and bolts of what a monitoring tool should be providing to you all. So when you come into the alert tab here, the first screen that you're being presented with is kind of like a UI, a mailbox, if you will. Anybody can come in here and see at any given time the type of alerts that are being captured here. How many of them have been captured? What's the status of them? Anybody been actioning them and so forth here? Let me go over to the left-hand side here. You'll see configure alerts. And this is really speaks to the power of SQL Monitor in terms of the type of alerts that were given to you out of the box. Again, a lot of emphasis, a lot of communication goes on between my peer group, the PMs for all of our tools, and our customer base. And here you can see the type of alerts that we are capturing. This comes from those conversations. I think that Redgate really consciously tries to provide at least 99% of all of the alerts that as DBAs we would be concerned with out of the box, right? Disk space alert, for example, here you go with my processor utilization. I have an Azure footprint out there, so I'm looking at my CPU, my DTU utilization. You have your SQL Server alerts here. Obviously, deadlocking is something that we're all concerned with. Failure of jobs, long-running queries, and I can select any of these alerts obviously here and do a little bit more further customization to it as well. One of the nice things I like here is really being able to stagger that alert. This was something that again I didn't have in my day. I had many tools that I used throughout my career, some of which, as I look back, were very novice and simple, quite honestly here. But really, it was just a process of you're looking at an instance, it's green, and then it goes to red, and then it was just 4 alarm fire from that point here. With this kind of staggering, tactic, this is something that allows for you to really be given a buffer. If there is something that is triggering, that is taking your server into a detrimental state, don't just wait for it to turn red and wait for all the irate folks to kind of surround you, waiting for you to fix things. Give yourself a little buffer. Have this tool kind of trigger based on, settings that you dictate as opposed to it going from green to red. Give a little warning, alert out there, so you can kind of do that initial view, that initial triage. Maybe it is something like we just looked at in terms of that CPU. It's not something that requires an immediate, all hands on deck mode. One of the other things that I like about this tool, allow me to kind of go back to where we were, configure alerts again, is really, where do these alerts get triggered? This is also something that I find to be fantastic. So if you look over here on the left-hand side, I can go ahead and start drilling down. So here I am on the SQL Server level. So I can go ahead and establish these alerts and have them be just universally housed at the server level. I can scroll down to the database level, and I can go ahead and establish alerts based at the database level. I can go right down to the job level. and start basing my alerts there at the job level, really getting as granular as possible. And what this really does is reduce the noise. Okay, if any of y'all don't know what that is, really, again, I'll revert back to my previous life here in the data centers. My previous firms, we used to do a lot of uh, acquisitions of different companies, right? And when we would acquire different companies, they might have had their own tool set in place from a monitoring standpoint, and we never holistically said, hey, you have to use what we're using here at the home office, continue to use your products, and so on and so forth. So, uh, you know, needless to say, I had enterprise level tools all the way down to, operators and DBAs running scripts against specific servers. And really what ultimately started to happen over time is that some of the lesser used tools, even though they were a part of the data center, were not really cared for any longer. We didn't really update the alerting. And really what started to occur was that you were over inundated with a lot of alerts that were ghost alerts, noise. And what really started to happen in terms of the operators and the DBAs, they became accustomed to really knowing what those ghost alerts were versus what real alerts were. And it kind of created an atmosphere of relaxation, if you will. Not something that I would probably look for from a full-time operator. All right. So having this kind of granular control over where those alerts get triggered reduces that noise down. So when this tool does pick up something that is of a detrimental state, you as an operator, as a DBA, you effectively can go ahead and start doing your job. We dove into the reports tab because reports is often something that I always talk about with folks when I start talking about this product here. It's a necessary aspect to a reporting tool or a monitoring tool, I should say. Having the information compiled in a manner that can be disseminated either to junior folks or maybe your C-level folks up, your executive staff who need to make budgetary type decisions based on hardware refreshes and so on and so forth, reporting is obviously necessary. In the particular case here with SQL Monitor, we are doing a reporting format, what we call tiles. And you can see up here, I can add a tile. And of course, you can create your reports. You can customize that based on whatever metrics are important to you here. You'll notice here in the lower left-hand side, a lot of various metrics from different levels. So you have my machine level metrics, you have SQL Server metrics, you have your database metrics. Again, I have my Azure database metrics out here, AG, my VMware metrics. We can talk a little bit about that momentarily. So whatever makes sense to you, for example, disk percentage used, just go ahead and select it. You go through all of the different boxes here and kind of select what is of importance to you. And then as the tile is populated, go ahead and add that tile, and then this becomes a part of the overall reporting scheme. We're kind of showing you a couple of different example tiles here. Your instances with the lowest uptime, so you can see all of your different instances hovering over it, of course, getting some more details. Your fastest filling disks, really nice, I think, for the DBAs as well. Here you can see what current capacity is. And then based on your change rate, your growth rate of your data, for example, we're also giving you a little window here in terms of how many days you have available before you're dealing with full capacity disks. You can, of course, generate this report, on various different viewpoints. You can look at your environment over every half a day, what's been going on, or you can look at it over a period of a month. Of course, exporting this information off into a PDF so you can, again, disseminate that to the folks that need to know. And as I scroll down, just some good information again. And what I'm showing you all here is the top 5. Okay, team? So regardless if I have 5 or 10 or 150, you're just going to see the top 5 instances as it pertains to this category. This has been something that was discussed, that is currently being discussed in terms of conversations that I'm having with customers as well as the PMs. Customers may be wanting to have more than the top 5 here, for example. This is a attribute that we are looking at, and it could be a possible feature release as we move forward. A nice little synopsis in terms of my longest running queries. What server was that query on? What was the duration of that query? Again, a nice little uh, view in terms of my alerts. How many alerts have I been captured during this particular 7-day time frame? How many of those have been of a high nature versus the lower? What type of alerts were the ones that were the most being trendful here? And what kind of percentages do we see in terms of that trend? Are we decreasing that kind of exposure, or are we seeing an uptick in terms of the type of an alert that we're getting here? And then lastly, down here, instance weights by day. Just again, just an example in terms of what we have here in terms of this tool. The Estate tab, something new that we're working on here. So really, and when I talk about this is one of those areas that, again, that I found to be just busy work. It's necessary, obviously. This would be something that I compiled and kept in an Excel spreadsheet back in my day. Um, you know, just something that if I can really kind of maybe give to a junior DBA or a junior operator, that was definitely something that I'd look to do first. But to be able to have this kind of information compiled by the product and presented to you in this kind of format just takes that kind of that job responsibility away from you. The time that it would take to maintain this in and of itself, take that away. Continue to do traditional DBA work here. Allow for this tool to maintain this record. I can see all of my different SQL servers. What versions am I running on? Any updates up here that I have available for me from a service pack standpoint? Can I download? Am I in support or am I not in support? Visibility, understanding everything that's going on within my estate. Um, Fantastic attribute. And at any time, team, this website here that I'm on is customer facing. So you guys can go ahead and hit that site and work with this demo environment just as I am. But over here on the right hand side, you'll see this What's New button. And this is something that we provide from the PMs, to kind of show you guys out there what we're working on currently in development, what those new feature releases are looking like. And if you want to go ahead and try those out, kind of get a glimpse as to what those are doing, just go ahead and select. And then lastly, over here on the configuration page, this is really where, you set this tool up to really interact with your environment. Okay. This is where, of course, you add your monitored servers. And when you're adding those servers, obviously, you can add them, based on a server name or a cluster name. Or if you want to do a bulk upload, just, introduce a script with all of your different servers. Very easy to go ahead and begin that communication with our product. As you saw before, VMware, being able to introduce your hypervisors now, whether you have a vCenter or an ESXi host that you want to bring into the monitoring realm here, you can do that right now. So we can look at the host level, track that CPU, that disk IO from the vCenter perspective, all through this one UI. Something that I think a lot of our customers are utilizing today as well. Tracing extended events, obviously something that's necessary in terms of just doing investigation. Let me go back to alerts if you don't mind, because I want to kind of show something that I think a lot of my customers have, immediate value with here. You notice here I have a lot of blocking processes being tracked. I have some deadlocking here as well. Obviously, this occurs every day, in the world of SQL Server. So I want to kind of understand what my deadlocking looks like here. And this is called, visualization, kind of like what I was talking about previously here with respect to the level of DBA. If I'm a DBA by mistake, for example, I might not have a full grasp as to, being a traditional DBA. Deadlocking here, I can see very quickly, what my affected SPIDs are. Okay, what server, what login name was the one affected by. So now as a DBA, I can kind of see my waiters, and make kind of an adjustment here in terms of, what SPIDs might need to be killed versus others. As I scroll down, again, a lot of good data here. What queries are being affected by that particular deadlock. All right. So this is something that really came out of a direct conversation with our customers here last year. Kind of giving a little bit more visual help in terms of those deadlocks without kind of going through running scripts and finding out, what those processes are, what those affected SPIDs are. Taking that time away from you all to immediately address and start dealing with issues. That's really the key to the whole visualization piece here. Authentication, obviously, this is something that I kind of spoke about in terms of the DevOps practice. More times than often, most of my customers, if not all, we're just kind of using role-based permissions now through Active Directory. And this kind of goes to that DevOps mantra to where I can really be able to provide this tool regardless of what environment you're in or what group, development versus DBA. Um, you know, get visibility to your code, to your servers. And then of course I can also dictate what those views are based on my role permissions here. So if I'm in the lower environment, I'm a developer, I might not be so concerned with the higher environment, what's going on in production and so forth. But I do want to be self-serving. I want to be at least understanding of what's going on in my development world. Conversely, as a production DBA, I might not really have too much emphasis on the lower environment. I might be just concerned with production or the holistic view, as you saw in my overview tab, where I want to just see the entire estate. I can, of course, adjust that view and those settings, all based off of Active Directory. I have a base monitor connection here. Let's talk a little bit about that. So as I was saying in the beginning, one copy of base monitor can effectively, cover about 200 or so instances. But to do some load balancing, or maybe you have a footprint out there in a cloud infrastructure, I can install a base monitor in both of those areas and then kind of load balance. Maybe have 50 SQL servers go to base monitor 1. I have another 50 going to base monitor 2, and so on and so forth here. And this is really something that just allows for you to have more control over, the scalability of your estate, and to effectively make sure that you are performance tuning and not introducing, unnecessary load through the environment, and then potentially exposing, you know, impacts to your customers, to your users out there. Your notifications, obviously, this is important. All of the major means of being notified if you're not sitting in front of this screen looking at it. Any alerting and you want to be notified via email, of course, obviously set that up here. Any kind of integration with Slack, which is a big channel here for us at Redgate here, an internal kind of communication tool, much akin to Skype, if you will. Full Slack integration out of the box. If you want to set up any kind of SNMP traps, you can also do that. If you have an internal hospital or healthcare URL or intranet, and you want to establish a proprietary URL to really show everyone, again, all those alerts that are being captured, go ahead and do so. And then lastly, down here, PagerDuty integration for any kind of SMS texting or anything of that nature. So, regardless of you trying to maybe hide from this product, good luck. We'll find you somehow, some way. Purging, obviously here, how long do you keep this historical information all fully adjusted by you, the user, the DBA? Most of my customers, 60 to 90 days here, I think is pretty much best practice, industry standard. But again, fully accommodatable to you in terms of what you want to do and how long you want to keep that data. So for example, if you remember when I was doing that back in time, showing you that back in time, this matters, okay? How far back can you go? And this is where you kind of adjust that time frame. And then lastly down here, the customized area, because this is something that I think really separates Redgate from the rest of the pack out there. All right, if you noticed in this area here, I'll select SQL Monitor Metric, and then I'm going to find custom metric here. And this is going to kind of present a very robust repository of different alerts that were compiled either by our development team here at Redgate, our Microsoft MVPs that we have on staff, customer asks in particular. So, as I was saying before, in terms of that alert, we try and really suffice 99% of those customers out there out of the box with all of those alerts that we give you all. But there might be some certain things that are in your world, in your environment, that are just particular to you. So you can customize your own alert. If you have the ability to write T-SQL, you can go ahead and write that commandlet for you. For example, here, total database file size. If I select it, here's the syntax that was compiled. If any of these make sense, install a metric, and this becomes now a customized alert within your build of SQL Monitor. If you guys and gals do not have the ability to write T-SQL, no problem. You come to Redgate afterwards and let us know what the attributes are that you're trying to capture from an alert standpoint, and we'll write that T-SQL commandlet for you. This is not an upsell opportunity. We'll do that free of charge. Something, like I said, that just goes to the emphasis of the relationship between Redgate and our customers out there. Okay, this really kind of summarizes my demo. If you don't mind, let me kind of go right back into our slide deck and we'll continue on uh, with the presentation. So we have a German IT service provider, Fiducia, and what they do is they provide systems that power about 36,000 some odd ATMs, over 80 million different bank accounts in Germany. Last year, they implemented our solution, Redgate SQL Monitor, to really better manage the performance of what they saw as a growing SQL Server estate, and they started to deliver better customer satisfaction and really started to drive growth for their business. But they had further additions of about 150 servers expected throughout this year and going into the first quarter of next year. What we saw were the DBAs were being forced to, start considering hiring either more people or investing in a third-party tooling. Since they implemented SQL Monitor, Fiducia has been able to scale their operations really at an unprecedented rate. They've introduced those 150 some odd new servers already this year, as well as about 70 new applications so far. Managing this increase in servers would typically require additional support, jeopardize the quality. However, with our tool, it has really enabled that DBA team to remain the same size while also quickly alerting those to the performance issues, allowing the team to be more proactive. The team now has more knowledge and confidence that they're delivering the high standard of service really that their customers expect. Questions and answers. Looking at the question box here, a couple of different questions, and I always get this, it seems, through every webinar. How is this product licensed? As a sales engineer, not really comfortable talking about licensing. I always let the account teams kind of handle that conversation. But in a nutshell, really, this is licensed per operating system. Okay, so whatever instance you have out there that has a SQL Server, you're going to require a license for it. Pretty simple licensing structure. I have another question here in terms of how we are presenting the data. What are we doing? What are we doing to, how are we getting the data to be presented in this fashion? I understand the question. Okay, so with SQL Monitor, we are accessing 5 different data collection points. Okay, and this is how we present that graphical representation. So we're going to be using our perfmon counters. We're going to be accessing the WMIs, the DMVs, as well as query and ping. Those 5 major collection points are what we are using as a SQL Monitor to present that data in a graphical format that we saw prior to. This is also an agentless solution, so I want to kind of put that out there as well. We're not going to be installing anything, on those SQL servers that we're monitoring as well. If at any time you need to have some documentation for this product or any of our products, please go to documentation.red-gate.com. This will give you a listing of all of our manuals for all of our products, SQL Monitor being a part of that for your review at any time. Those were the only questions I had. I thank you all for posing those. Lastly, here's our contact information. So afterwards, please feel free to contact us with any questions that you might have after the webinar, as well as our site. Please feel free to go to redgate.com to really see everything that we're doing in terms of the database. Bringing that database into a DevOps methodology, I think, is key for us here, both from, again, the development standpoint and then our tools here that help the operational folks as well keep up with those teams to really tie in the overall DevOps message in the overall healthcare organization. I want to thank everyone for taking the time this morning. I appreciate everybody's time. Look forward to talking about SQL Monitor or any other product here. Again, feel free to connect with me either on LinkedIn or on Twitter. I look forward to having continued conversations with you all. Thanks for taking the time this morning.